Today's topic is landscape ecology. Now, what is a landscape? Landscape, in a layman's language, we say that this is the area, right? Which is having a particular kind of vegetation or fauna. So, different scientists at different times, periods of time, they have defined the landscape as the first definition is by von Humboldt. In 19th century, he said that landscape is total character of a region, or we can define it as landscape is a heterogeneous land area composed of a cluster of interactive ecosystems. So there are a number of ecosystems at a particular place which are interacting with each other. So that heterogeneous area is called landscape. This is the definition by Foreman in 1986. And the recent one is by J. Weens in 2002, that landscape is a mosaic of different elements and that the variety of the elements creates heterogeneity within an area. So it's one and the same thing. We are talking about the heterogeneous land area, and that is because of the presence of different elements in that. That is because of different type of ecosystems in that area. So landscape, that is a mosaic of patches or ecosystems. You can see here, this is a complete landscape. These diamond signs, they are for the coniferous forest. So you can see coniferous forest, they are present all along this landscape. Then there is also the mixed type of forest present, and there is a wetland lake. This is a mixed type of the forest here. And lake areas are there in between. So it's a heterogeneous one. It has number of ecosystems together at a place. So in general, landscape can be defined as a broad area in which we are able to perceive relationships between structural and functional components. This is what is ecosystem. Ecosystem is when we say that the living and non-living components, they are interacting with each other, means how they are related to each other. So this is a broad area where we perceive the relationships between the structural and functional components. Now, parameters which we can analyze in a landscape when we study a particular area, we can look upon its physical layout. Then we can establish what has caused it to look that way, means what were the different reasons involved behind its present outlook. And we can understand how this impact the organisms in that area. So if there is any kind of the change which is being brought about in that landscape, how it is going to affect the organisms of that area. It may be a natural reason, it may be a man-made one. So coming to the main topic, landscape ecology. So obviously ecology here means a science where we are going to study about the landscapes. There's a study of patterns and processes that occur across a landscape. Patterns, we are talking about the physical appearance, and processes means we are talking about the interactions. So landscape ecology is the study of the entire complex cause-effect network between living communities and their environmental conditions which prevail in a specific section of the landscape. So that overall study, that overall ecology of the landscape, what kind of land it has, what kind of ecosystems are existing, how they are getting affected because of different factors, this complete study that comes under landscape ecology. The German biogeographer Karl Troll, he coined this term landscape ecology in 1939. It's a very, very young discipline. It has just started, and the main it was around World War II in Central and Eastern Europe. It integrates, it's a mixed science, it's a synthetic science, so it integrates number of components like geographical, botanical, related to animals, humans, etc. Coming to the history of landscape ecology, it originated in late 1930s when Karl Troll, he noted that all the methods of natural science are captured in the area of landscape science. So whatever is related to the natural science in a particular biological system, that comes under the landscape science, and this integrative field of study that became widely recognized as landscape ecology in Central Europe in around 1960s. It had its beginning in North America during 1980s when Barrett recommended funding for a workshop related to it. that, okay, we should have a separate concept where we are studying the landscape ecology, and they asked for funding related to that to carry out research related to this kind of the aspect of nature. And the meetings they were held, meetings of United States International Association for Landscape Ecology, they were held afterwards, and then they started a journal, that is, the journal named was Landscape Ecology. So then number of benchmark books in this field they were published, still they are getting published. And the cornerstone of the emerging science of landscape ecology is the study of the causes and consequences of spatial patterns. So basically now we are inclined about why the landscape has turned out to be a particular state, what was the reason behind that, and what can be consequences of that. So now it is more or less related to this overall aspect. There are three components of landscape ecology. That is, whenever we study landscape, we look for its composition. Composition means what kind of vegetation is there, habitat, or what kind of land uses are there. So, we are going to talk about the patches in that particular landscape. Structural component is we are going to look for the size of the patches, how those patches they are connected, and what is the overall heterogeneity across that landscape. So basically we are talking about the physical configuration, the physical appearance of that area. And the last component is functional one. Functional is related to the flow of energy, or if the organisms they are crossing the boundaries, or if there is any kind of the disturbance in that area. So that will come under the functional aspect. So compositional one, type of the vegetation and type of the land use. Structural is size of the patches, heterogeneity and connectivity between different patches. And functional is the flow of organisms, flow of energy, various disturbances which are changing the landscape. So that comes under the functional aspect. So this is how these elements they have been related. You can see here this is the smallest level, that is a landscape patch. And landscape patch is an individual forest here. It's a mixed kind of forest. But when we have more different types of the forest in that area at a larger scale, then we see that there are certain connecting elements. For example, here is a stream, and that stream is connecting this kind of the forest with the coniferous forest with this grassland also. So this connecting element will be called a corridor. Okay, and still at a bigger pace, if we observe a very large area, then we will see the mosaic pattern. You can see here, depending upon the different types of vegetation in that particular area or land use, the patterns they appear. If you have a satellite view, you can easily imagine that we can have different patches observed in a large landscape, and this is called the mosaic, landscape mosaic. So these are various elements. One is a landscape patch that refers to a particular type of the ecosystem. Then comes the landscape corridors, the areas which are connecting different patches, and the landscape mosaic, that is a very large geographical area in which different patches they are existing together. So this is a detail of all these three elements. The landscape matrix, a large area of similar ecosystem or vegetation type. So there is only one type of the ecosystem, and if there are more than one type, they'll be related. They will be of the same kind. The landscape patch, it is a relatively homogeneous area that differs from the surrounding matrix. For example, we just observe the coniferous forest. There may be a scrub forest. There may be deciduous forest. Okay, so it is a homogeneous area, and that is different from its surrounding matrix. So that will be called a landscape patch. A landscape patch differs from its surroundings matrix and may be referred to as a low quality or a high quality patch. This depends upon its productivity or biodiversity. What kind of species are there? What is their quality? What kind of vegetation cover is there? Let's suppose it's a barren land, so it will be a low quality land. And last is landscape corridor. It is a strip of the environment that differs from the matrix on either side. Let's suppose you are talking about a stream. Now across the left side of the stream and the right of the side of the stream, different kind of the vegetation will be there. So across that, you will observe that the environment differs on either side of that particular area, and it is going to connect different patches. So it is a connecting link between different patches. So such a kind of the landscape is called landscape corridor. For example, a stream with its riparian vegetation is an example of the natural landscape corridor. So these may be disturbance corridors that we'll study in detail, planted corridors, regenerated corridors, resource corridors, or remnant corridors. So there are different categories of corridors, how they developed or how they look. So again, once again, a picture of different elements of the landscape. You can see here we are starting from the smallest one, which is a patch. So this is a patch. We have grassland area here, a forest area here. So these are all individual patches which are relatively homogeneous, and they are different from the surrounding patches, surrounding vegetation. Then corridor. Corridor is the one which is connecting these patches. So here the stream is a corridor. So along this side and along this side, there will be different vegetation. Matrix. Matrix is this complete structure. So the most dominant element in the landscape is the matrix, which has interconnecting features. So we can say here, for example, this huge area, which is having this one type of the community, second type of the community, third type of the community, and in between the barren land. Together, this constitutes a matrix. And when different matrices, they are present in a particular area, all of them, so which are having the mixed composition, different patches along that, that is called a mosaic. So it's at a wider landscape. Now coming to different types of corridors, first is the remnant corridor. Remnant, that means if in a particular area the original vegetation is removed, but a strip of native vegetation that is left uncut, so that was by chance or because of some, let's suppose, forest fire or any natural calamity, most of the vegetation was removed but a small strip remained there, so that vegetation left will be called remnant corridor. Second is disturbance corridor. This is a linear disturbance produces disturbance corridor. For example, you can say here we have a homogeneous landscape, okay, and by chance through that a power line was planned. So along that power line corridor, this will be connecting now the forest landscape, but it will divide that landscape into two areas or more than two if a power line is up to that extent. So it will serve as a barrier and species now will not be able to cross that area, or there can be some railway track or there can be some bridge or something which is dividing a particular homogeneous landscape. That will be called a disturbance corridor because now it is not allowing free movement of the species in that landscape. Next is planted corridors. As the name explains, here means we are planting vegetation. So plantation is by human beings. So different kind of the economic or ecological trees, they are planted in a particular area. And this is how the tree corridors, they are established specifically in those regions which are treeless. And this is to reduce wind erosion, soil erosion, and to provide wood and wildlife habitat. Here you can see we have the pictures of Osage orange tree plantations, and there is multiflora rose plantations by the farmers which help in providing firewood. It serves as fencing. This provide habitat to wildlife. Okay, and when we plant these areas, that serves as a barrier for the livestock movement. So they cannot cross because we have established this along the fence. So there is a barrier created in a same landscape. So it's a kind of planted corridor. Next is resource corridors. These are narrow strips of natural vegetation that extends for long distances across the landscape. For example, there is a gallery forest along a stream. So along a stream, you will observe that there is a particular type of the vegetation, and that will continue along that complete strip of that corridor, along that stream. So these strips, they not only improve water quality, but they also reduce fluctuations in the stream levels because they serve as the sponging bodies just like wetlands, or they're on the embankments of the rivers when there is a special kind of the vegetation. So they are going to improve the quality of soil as well as water in that area. So they are very resourceful. That's why these are called resource corridors. And the next one is regenerated corridor. Regenerated means when there is a regrowth. So Let's suppose there was some calamity, some is happening because of which the vegetation disappeared in an area, and then there was a regrowth of the vegetation in that landscape matrix, then that will be called regenerated corridor, and this will be along a strip. Since it's a corridor, it has to connect different patches also. So it is not in a particular area, but this is traversing across that large landscape, and it is having a particular type of the vegetation, and it is interconnecting also. For example, the hedgerows that develop along the fences due to natural processes of secondary succession. If there is some fence across the border of some country, the fences are laid, you all know, and in that region of the fence, by chance, because of the secondary succession, the natural plant communities they develop, those they will be now called regenerated corridors. And sometimes there are special bird species observed in that area, and those bird species they will regulate the insect pest and the agricultural land pests. So this is how they are important ecologically also. So that was all about the type of corridors, and we'll continue this in the next lecture.